AliWarren. Thank you for agreeing to join me today. I have an unfair advantage with you over some of the other artists that I've interviewed because you've been in the PRPGmx residency for what, 3 or 4 months now, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so you've been in the residency for about 4 months, and you just participated in our art lab project, which was a 10-week process of artists proposing work, producing it with in and out of the group and individual meetings, and then accumulating in the show. And one of your pieces is actually in customs right now here in Mexico City. Yeah, I know. It's in customs, and hopefully we'll have it very shortly. So we've provided all the documentation. So I'm excited about seeing that in person as well, because this is the thing about like the whole digital realm of the last year with the pandemic is, I've never actually met you in person, but I've also never physically seen your work.
Right.
So I'm just so excited to have that experience and compare the differences, because what I see in photographs is entrancing to me and beautiful. And I've said this, a myriad of times. It reminds me of, Lucian Freud, like his paintings that he did of his own daughters. And so I really engaged with your story. Can you tell us where you're at right now?
I'm in South Lake Tahoe. I live in California. South Lake is about 3 hours east of San Francisco, directly east of San Francisco by car. So it's pretty nice to be close to the city, because it's very ski town, mountain town, not a lot of art happening up here. But my family and I love living here because we love to recreate and backpack and ski and all that good stuff. So.
Right. Well, it's a balance, right? And then you have space to work, and you seem to manage to be able to create time to work too, because I know that you're also a full-time nurse. And
part-time.
Part-time. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah.
that's still quite a bit of energy and time, especially during the pandemic. So.
Yeah. It has.
And you have your kids have been home for a year now,
yeah.
as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been crazy.
And I mean, like the subject matter of your work is your family for the most part. So can you tell us a little bit how you came around to doing that subject matter and the themes that emerged for you from that?
Yeah, well, I've always painted portraits in the past, and people have always been my thing. Once I finished nursing school, it was my ultimate dream to get back to my art. And so I really, when you set out to paint or do your work, it's always like, well, what's the next subject matter going to be, right? Like, I find that to be the hardest part about creating a body of work is like, well, where do I start, and what is it going to be, and how do I make it interesting, and how do I make it work that I want to do, but also have it be relevant to the time, and keep pushing myself forward. So I started by kind of practicing with my girls, because they were the people that just were here and around me. And I saw this really cool thing. I think Annie Leibovitz does these like master classes now where she teaches, how to be creative and how to pursue your dream. And I didn't actually take the class, but I was watching it, and the preview was amazing. And one of the things she said is, if you don't have models, use the people that you love, and use the people that you're surrounded by. So I just started thinking, well, why not? I mean, my girls have red hair, they're pretty interesting looking. And so I started experimenting with photographing them. And I don't have a traditional education in art. And I honestly have always wanted to do figure painting. But it was challenging to figure out how to compose these pieces. And so I just dove in and started, and each piece has been a big learning process for me. and yeah, I just I really enjoy painting my daughters, and I kind of have an intense history with my older one, which is the one that I usually do the double face with. She almost died and had a liver transplant, and so in some ways I feel like I work through a lot of my fears, trepidation that I've kind of built up over the years of her being sick for so long. She's really healthy now, but you know, I think that was a big emotional component for me, is just kind of immortalizing her in the paintings, and immortalizing, you know, my other daughter as well, because there was such a fear for me that she could have very easily died at a young age. So that, I feel like that's a big part of my work, is kind of life and death, and mortality, and how these kiddos, they grow up so fast. It's literally like, people say that like it's so trite, but it's so true, that you know, you turn around and they've just grown, you know, a centimeter overnight, and they change every day. So I really enjoy capturing them in their different stages.
Yeah, I mean, there's a real passion to the way that you depict your subject matter, and the emotions are very clear. I mean, obviously, like just in this one right here, I mean, there's very different emotions in the way that they're interacting or not interacting with you, which, you know, also relates to stages of development, and like, you know, and you know, what are we doing here? Like, what is this? Or, but you know, I'm curious, when you talk about your daughter's health issue, and then we see her depicted like here, like with a double face. Is this about like having the second chance, like a second life, or is that what the metaphor is? Or,
You know, I don't exactly know. I just know that I was there's this amazing artist named Garant, and I love her work. She's quite she's kind of in more of like the juxtaposed kind of a little more like skate pop art, real kind of really contemporary, but she does these double faces, and it really inspired me. And I thought, you know, I really love that. And I started experimenting in Photoshop and having my sister layer the different photographs that I took. I just wanted to provide interest, and I find it really cool to latch on to a face and then to actually have it turn into a second face. So I really try to make sure that one of the eye fits for both of the faces. But yeah, it could be that. It definitely could be that. I never thought of it that way, but I really like that idea that, you know, she kind of has lived two different lives. Like, she was so sick before the age of 4, and now she's really healthy. But more than anything, I'm coming from a design standpoint too, of just like, well, what do I want to, what do I find interesting in paintings, and what do I want to look at? And for me, just kind of creating some interest in that duality, that kind of transparency. There's a transparency would be a good word for it.
Great.
Yeah.
And I mean, in the background of that one, and then here you have some landscapes. What is the relationship of the landscapes to your work? Because these are on their own, they're quite gorgeous as well. So I'm curious where that comes from for you.
You know, I did a landscape years ago that's very large, and it was part of a altarpiece that I was trying to recreate. The Ghent altarpiece by Jan van Eyck was my inspiration, and I was trying to do it with a modern theme. And one of the main like, I would say the main bottom panel, and it's really quite large, was like, it was like Jesus in the middle, and all the lambs were coming in, and there were green fields. And I hadn't really done a lot of landscapes before that, but I recreated it as LA, Los Angeles, and all the freeways. And my commentary was like, well, look at how human beings are taking over the world. Again, it's like kind of like mortality, Armageddon, like we're all, you know, our life is so fleeting. And so it really is more, it's more about that. It's more about like, oh my God, look at this chaos, like really getting into the detail. I'm so detail oriented, and sometimes with figures, you know, there's only so much detail you can do without it like losing its magic, because there has to be big parts of the figure that don't have a lot of detail for it to be balanced and look
Right.
good. So with the cityscapes, I can just like totally dive into that kind of neurosis, and having done that Ghent altar piece, kind of inspirational piece, I really got into it, and I felt like in the history of my painting, that piece in particular of my cityscape was one of the most successful. And so I didn't get to like really live that out. And that was way back in probably, I want to say like 2001 that I did that, a long time ago. And so ever since then, I've been like, oh, I want to paint more cities. So sometimes I just take a break from figure painting and get really obsessive and linear with the cities.
Yeah, I'm thinking that it has some kind of restorative quality to it for you when you go from the figurative to the sort of the linear landscapes of all these buildings, and the perspective of it is super interesting. It's like a photographic perspective presented in oil paint. So I do love it. They're quite beautiful. I know that in the particular piece that you're going to be presenting here for imPosible, the show that opens on the 24th of April, and on Artsy as well. That's not it. I clicked too soon. I know with this particular piece, can you talk about the process of creating this and the significance of the models that you're using here? Talk about the significance of the models first, and then sure. I'd like to go into some detail about how this came together, because you did this in the Art Lab project. So I had the honor of actually watching it develop and hear you talk about it over a 10-week period. So I want to expose a little bit of that here too.
Well, so the models are my youngest daughter, Charlotte, who is 10. She's the one sitting on the couch with the red hair. And then Julia is our nanny, and she's a really special person in our life. She's about 26 years old, and she's just a really rare soul. She's the rare like person of that generation that's not self-absorbed and doesn't have like a face Instagram account. She's incredibly natural and down to earth, and I really like love her with all my heart, and she has been so good to my girls, and I just adore her, and she adores us, and we're kind of like, we're her second family. She's from Chicago. So, and she's kind of a hippie, like she's real natural, and she loves my artwork. Her mom's an artist. So when I asked her if she would model for me, she was totally gung-ho. I actually asked her to model topless at one point, and with the girls sitting next to her, and it was just a little bit too provocative. I didn't want to make the girls feel uncomfortable being part of a painting where, you know, she was nude, and it was great, but it's quite provocative, and that's the reason I actually have them very clothed in this painting, is because my girls are kind of going through adolescence, and although they're super comfortable with their bodies and nudity, I wanted to represent them in a respectful way, because they can't really make those decisions for themselves right now about what they're ultimately comfortable with. They don't realize that like lots of people are seeing these paintings.
Right. Well, I mean, that's the thing, is lots of people will see the work too. So it's not necessarily an object that's only going to exist inside of the home.
Exactly.
So,
exactly. And they don't know the implications of that. So I just trying to be considerate of that. So I found this dress and this shirt at the local Goodwill. I was trying to find something very classical in nature, kind of timeless. I positioned them in this way to represent Mary and Jesus, but I wanted it to be a role reversal. So I wanted Julia to be on the ground, because obviously she's the adult, and she would more, Charlotte's a bit older. She's not a baby or toddler, but I wanted it to really kind of harken back to Renaissance period and all of the religious iconography. And I love Flemish painters like Jan van Eyck. And so when I was painting Julia, I really wanted it to kind of have that kind of stark, very obvious, clear feeling of her face, and her hand and her arm were really important to me. And in this photo, it kind of cuts her hand off a little bit. There's a little more gray at the bottom in real life,
Oh,
but
okay.
yeah, and the pants, I'm pleased with. Those were her velvet pants. They're like total hippie pants, and I wasn't sure if it was going to be too much, but I'm really pleased I put the striped pants in there. And yeah, I always strive to try to work with light. I'm not so pleased with the background on this one. I feel like the background and the floor were both kind of grayish white, and I felt like I had to put that picture in to really ground the wall to make it look like a wall. Otherwise, it looked just really open and there wasn't a lot of depth there. So I've been looking. Last night I spent like 3 hours looking at a lot of Vermeer and like, who was the other person? It was Degas, and just a lot of classic painters, because I really want to get better with my backgrounds and the shadows to recede the interior back. I want to do a lot more paintings of interiors with figures.
Yeah, I wish I could remember the name, and I'll look it up for you and send it to you later, but there was an Italian still life painter, and you might want to look at, I'll find him for you, because you might want to look at him because he spent more time on the spaces between the objects.
Morandi.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. Yeah, and so that it kind of makes me think of that in a sense, in the way that you're using the spaces, these other spaces, because it's all these like smaller triangles of shapes, to me, that sort of anchor you and keep you moving through. I mean, obviously there's a motion with the stripes and it sort of pulls you in and you get this zigzag, but it's also for the amount of color and texture of the fabrics and the composition there, it's also quite serene, which is a really hard balance to achieve. So so I think it's really beautiful. I mean, I know that you tortured yourself over the fabric, like trying to get all that detail in, because it's just I mean, I'll zoom it in and hopefully won't lose too much quality here, but look at I mean, it's gorgeous the way that you have captured this and managed to get the highlights and stuff. But then even the couch, which that couch has appeared in, a couple of your other paintings too, but I think it is quite gorgeous. I mean, it really bounces well.
Thank you.
And I mean, I loved experiencing it with you and hear you like working through all your, little trials and tribulations of going the way through it. I myself sometimes too, it's like, I have short attention span. So generally I have to have several things going at the same time, because I'll get caught in that, in those details or something, and I could lose my way. How do you keep yourself balanced so that you can stay focused? Is there something that you do in your practice, or?
Yeah, I always have my vision on the next piece. Like if I don't have something lined up, like this piece in the background, I'm getting really close to being done with. So I spent some time this morning photographing Tatum, and I'm really excited about this one where she's laying on the ground and there's reflections. It reminds me of Jenny Saville is like one of my heroes, beyond my hero. I idolize her, and she has that piece of the red face where it's like on the cement and there's all these reflections of the face. And right. Anyway, I was really inspired by that piece when I was taking pictures of her, because she was laying on this concrete floor and there's lots of reflections. So, but yeah, I always have to have the next piece in mind, but I'm kind of, I'm a really hard worker, really, when it comes down to it, and I'm really good at disciplining myself, even though I constantly feel like I'm failing in that way, like trying to be a good mom and always put them first, and then work my studio hours always around my kids and my husband. And it's just, I really just eat, live, and breathe art when I have any spare time besides exercising, eating, taking care of my girls, and doing my nursing job when I can. But yeah, I try to get in here, and even if I have 2 hours, I figured out that I can put my palette in the freezer, and it like preserves the paint. So that was a huge breakthrough, because then I can just pull it out, and as long as I give it time to thaw out, which is about 20 minutes, it's nice, because I don't have to setting up my palette is like the most tedious, worst part of painting for me. Like, right. I really hate it. I don't do a lot of pre-mixing of colors. Like if I know I'm going to work on that green couch, yeah, I'll do a bunch of like phthalo green with the darks, and I'll do a little bit of a light version, but I work pretty thin. And so I don't do a lot of mixing on the palette. I use my brush to mix as I go. I have my base colors that I mix, but they're probably about 6, you know, besides my exterior paints right out of the tube. So yeah, I don't know. I can really drive myself. It's my best quality, my worst quality, because I can really be hard on myself. But I honestly feel like it's my destiny. And if I don't get in here enough, I'm really letting myself down. So I just get in here. I don't have a lot of pieces going at once. I sometimes feel like that's hard for me. I get a little like frazzled if I have too many pieces going at once, where I know a lot of artists are like, oh, I have 6 pieces going, and they just rotate through, which I think is fantastic. But I kind of get obsessive and like really on board with the painting, and I just have to finish it. I just have this feeling that like I've got to stick with it, because I lose the vision. If I'm working on too many pieces, it's like I lose that initial inspiration. So I usually work right through on one piece. And then I have the next piece in my mind ready to go. And then, you know, maybe what I'll do is, if I'm like, this one needed to dry, this bottom part, because I tend to mess up the bottom part with like my knees or my palette, because that, if I'm working high, I can scrape it. So
right.
Unfortunately, I wasn't smart. I did this first, finished that, and now I'm working on this. But I have to give it time to dry. So sometimes I'll start the drawing and the composition on the canvas of the next one, but that's about as far as I'll get, and then I'll bust this one out, and then I'll start on that one. So that's kind of my routine.
Have you ever tried to work upside down? Not you, but the painting.
No.
I want to be clear about that.
No. I could not do that on my hands. No, but I do. I have a favorite artist. His name's Edward Povey. He's a British painter, and he posts photos of himself all the time working on a piece on its side, upside down, and I'm like, wow, that's really interesting. What's your thoughts on?
About 20 years ago or so, I interviewed Chuck Close, and he was in his studio, and he has well, you know, he's disabled, so he has this entire contraption so that the painting can be moved and he can stay in one place, which I've always found fascinating. And sometimes when I do something like on one side and I know I'm going to endanger it, or if I get stuck in something, I'll turn the work and see what comes out of it. And it also forces you to really pay attention to perspective, because once it's established, if you change it in another, you know, by moving that, if you change the perspective with the move, it, you know, it can mess things up, but it does jog the brain a little bit sometimes. So
definitely, I love that idea. I want to start working a little more from my head and less photo references, so it would be a good exercise to do that, because I think
turn the photo too.
What's that?
You could turn the photo too.
That's true. Actually, that's actually a good call. Definitely. I like that.
That would make it easier actually to maintain the perspective. I think that would throw me off completely if I were using the photo as a reference and they were in different positions. But
totally. Exactly.
Well, I mean, I commend you. I mean, it's one of the things that I respect about you, as well as your ability to maintain discipline, because a lot of artists that I've worked with over the years, or friends and various things, you know, they're like, well, how do you manage to continue producing with all the things that you do, and or, you know, I can't believe that you do this on top of that, or something like that. And I'm like, well, art is a discipline. I mean, you know, it's not just the 10,000 hours, you know, to gain mastery. It's the constant pursuit and plowing through things, even though the situations of life may prevent you from doing that sometimes, you know. And not that family is a situation of life, but like I mean, I've seen you interact with your children, and I know your love for them, and I love the way that you talk to them and respect them. That's not always the case with parents all the time, and they're clearly, you know, like there's a clear like intellect, and you know, just a wonderful development too. So I think it's fascinating to see your paintings. How do your children respond to the paintings, like, and the rest of your family? Like, I mean, most importantly is your children. I mean, how do they feel about see themselves in the paintings?
You know, they're all about show me the money, mom. Like, which is so funny because I mean, I'm an emerging artist. I haven't sold a ton of my work, but I tell them, and I told the neighborhood kids who are part of Three Companions, listen, if you model for me and I sell a piece, I'm going to pay you $50 to $75, depending on how much it sells for. I'm happy to share in the spoils. And so they're all just like, oh, now you're part of this show. Are you going to sell your work, Ali? Are we going to get paid?
Oh, right.
So I can be kind of demanding with them. Even in fact, this morning, I was asking if they could recreate this pose that they had done for me, but it's just hilarious because it was basically a pose where Charlotte was like laying her head on Tatum's chest, and like, I'm not kidding you, but I took these photos maybe 2 months ago, and it could have just been the mood of the day, but they've literally like changed that so much in the 2 months that Charlotte refused to lay her head on Tatum's chest because she's like, ew, mom, she has BO. Like, I can smell her BO, and I don't want to put my head on her chest. They're just like, they're such teenagers. So they're very proud to be a part of my work. They love it, but they're also like, they're just kind of like, yeah, whatever, it's your art. That's what mom does, So I think they get excited when I finish and they're part of it. But I think that sometimes modeling can be kind of tricky for them. They definitely like, I'm kind of weird in the way that I position them and the way what I want from them, and I'm kind of demanding. I have to like have them turn if the light's not good. I want one of them to be looking a certain way and the other way, and so yeah, they can be a little annoyed with me at times. Like, I made the model this morning, and they're both sick. They both have colds, but they're out of school. They're not in school, and I said the least you can do is like just waist up. Yeah, it's like
lay on the ground.
Just lay on the ground. Lay on the cold floor. God damn it.
You do you. Well, I'm showing this because I think it's really important also that people know that in your Instagram that you do expose your process. That you've documented a lot of the painting that we're going to be showing here for imPosible, and you have several videos as well that you produced during the process. So that's part of the Art Lab project, as I encourage the artists to document everything along the way, because it just enriches the experience for the viewers. In the time that I've known you, you've been pretty good about documenting these things. Do you consider this like just like a sketchbook, or like I don't know, what do you call those albums where you put memories? What are those called? I can't remember. I'm trying to think in Spanish. Scrapbook, right? It becomes sort of a scrapbook of the process, or a sketchbook, right?
Yeah. So yeah, totally. Well, I think for me, social media has been a complete game changer and life changer for me with my art. I'm not a big social media person with my personal life. I tend to be pretty private. It's kind of ironic because I'm very exposing of my family through my art, but when it comes to like posting photos of my husband and I don't do a whole lot of that. But it is a phenomenal way to be in touch with the art world at large. I live in a small town where I don't have exposure.
And like, this is a perfect example. You introduced me to this artist, and I've been working with him as well, but he's going to be a part of our summer show. But I mean, I love this balance that you create in your practice, where you'll be like, oh, I discovered this new artist, and and you start these conversations around the idea of like, you're out there looking for artists, and you're having, you talk to this person, all the time, and so.
Yep.
Very.
Well, it's my art community with you guys, with PRPG Residency, and I haven't gotten close to a lot of people in that group, but I want to get closer with them. I wish we could be in person, because I feel like if we were all in person, we'd be like thick as thieves. But that'll come. And but yeah, I think being on Instagram and sharing my work with people is one of my greatest joys. I get so much out of finding an artist that I love and checking out their history. And watching their progress. I really love certain artists. There's this artist, Laidley Miller, and she is phenomenal. She's one of the runners up for the Bennett Prize, which is an all-women figure painter, like renowned, like American competition, and she's one of the finalists. Anyway, she's really transparent with her process, and she posts all of her progress. And it's just, as a painter, you know, you get so much out of that, because we can't necessarily be with other people to watch how they paint. And it's like magic to me watching other people paint and seeing how they do it, and the paints that they use. I have conversations all the time with our artists, and I'm just like pinching myself because they're my idols, but they're, you know, they respect my work enough to pay me time and attention to answer my questions and kind of converse with me. But it just, I feel like it fills me up to the brim. Like I couldn't be without it. So I try to be on there pretty regularly, coming up with creative ideas about how to post something that somebody will find interesting, but also